Welcome again to another episode of Adam's Corner. I have a returning guest this week, and it's somebody that I can't believe it's been 2 years since you were last on. This is I'm proud to consider him a friend as well. We've broken bread before. Mr. Guy Aoki. He originally we talked to him 2 years ago about his time spent with Casey Kasem on American Top 40, and you can go back in the archives and find that episode. I think there's a lot of great material there, a lot of great stories he shared with us. Uh, After he left American Top 40, he went to work for Dick Clark. We touched on that briefly on the last episode, but we really didn't get into the specifics about it. And that's why this episode is here for everybody to take a listen to, because he's going to share some stories about interviewing and meeting your musical heroes, which he's done quite a bit of. And so it's good to have you back on. We'll just maybe get you to pick it up where you left off. If you want to give us a brief run up to getting the job at Dick Clark, working with Dick Clark, if you want to give us a brief run up to that, and then we can just pick it up.
Okay. Well, great to be back. Thanks for having me back on again. First of all, I was born and raised in Hilo, Hawaii. Came out to Occidental College in Los Angeles. And I got into the music business because I sent a trivia question to American Top 40. So I got the job there. I was there for 4 years, from 84 to 88. Then I went to the LA Times as a reporter. And then in 89, I got a job at Dick Clark Productions, writing his syndicated adult contemporary radio show called Countdown America, which later became the US Music Survey. So I did that from January 89 to December of 2005. So 17 years.
And that's a good run, I would say.
Not
that's a
bad.
very good run. Well, I was just curious, before we get into it, because we can tell some of the stories and with some of the actual meets and greets that you had, and the research that you did with it, but kind of the process, how when you would or how this all came to be. I'm sure you didn't just walk in the door and say, "Hey, I'm going to go out and interview so and so and so on." I'm sure you worked your way up to that at the with the job, and eventually you gained their confidence, and as we do, and then I'm sure they said, "Hey, go out and try this." There's a set of steps involved, and so I'll let you tell about that.
Well, I mean, when I got to American Top 40, I was there as a production assistant. So I was just there like pretty much like as a paid intern. You retype the scripts that the writers write, and you read the mail, and you pull out the long distance dedication request, and they actually asked us to grade them so the writers could be kind of get a leg up on what are the better ones versus what are the bad ones. So that kind of stuff. But then Daryl Morden and Merrill Schindler, who were two of the writers there, I noticed that they were doing extracurricular stuff. Like, Daryl was regularly in Music Connection magazine. Merrill was also a restaurant critic, so he was in the LA Herald Examiner as their restaurant critic, and he later on was on the radio giving advice on the way to eat. So I asked both of them, like, well, how do you guys get your stuff in? And Merrill goes, oh, just send your stuff in, just blah, blah, blah. It's okay. So I don't know. I think I did 3 articles for the Occidental newspaper at Occidental College.
Hmm.
To show you how hip I was for a college newspaper, I did reviews of Eric Carmen's album, Carpenter's compilation, and what was the, so I got laughed at. There was an editor there who was very nice to me, and she liked my writing, so she let me do those articles, even if you're not supposed to do those kinds of very pop articles in a college magazine, in a newspaper. But so I submitted that, and I guess it was enough for Bud Scarpa at Music Connection to give me a chance. So, I started doing some music reviews. And then at some point, I think it was February of 86 or March of 86, meaning 40 years ago this year, he said, you want to interview Smokey Robinson? I went, oh, yeah, okay. So that was my first in-person interview. So it's like
Oh,
you start with
wow.
Smokey Robinson. You start with Smokey Robinson. And I had not gotten the rhythm down of looking at my paper and ask a question, looking up and appearing like you're listening, and really listening, because if they say something that's really nothing you expect, you got to follow up. You got to go down that road. and you later on go back to whatever was your next question. And a lot of people don't do that, which really annoys me. They
Oh,
don't
same
listen.
here.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's so many lost stories because people were not paying attention. But anyway, so when I was with Smokey at his office at Motown Records on Sunset Boulevard when they were still independent, I still hadn't gotten the rhythm down of okay, look, oh okay, and then look down. I just didn't have it down yet. But he was a very patient guy, so he was a nice guy to start off with. And so I
Yeah.
started doing interviews like that for magazines, Music Connection, and what did I do
Hmm.
before? Rock Scene, and then of course I got the LA Times thing, and then I did the Donny Osmond thing because my main thing in going to the LA Times was I wanted to give Donny Osmond a good name. I was sick and tired of people putting him down for the goody two shoes image from the Donny Marie show, and I just wanted to do a story which would make people think, this guy is. We laugh at him because he's very white, he's very religious, and he was a teeny bopper. But come on, he did Puppy Love in one take after falling asleep. Okay, he told me the story. He goes like, I was tired. I was in the studio and I was kind of dozing off, but I saw these musicians walking in, got a whole string section, and I went, wow, they're coming in from my record. And he was kind of dozing off. And then Mike Kerr, who produced the session, goes, okay, record. And he goes, what are we doing? And I go, and they called it Puppy Love. So that's the record that we hear is him waking up seconds before, seconds after he fell asleep. I mean, the guy was amazing. Anyway,
Those are the
so I did the Donny
yeah.
Osmond thing. And then when I went to the Clark in '89, it was my job to interview artists because whoever made the countdown, we wanted to have, I think, interviews with two current artists in the countdown. And we also had a spotlight feature every week where we would play some 4 or 5 hits by an artist who was in the countdown, preferably, or if not, someone who was what they call an evergreen, like I don't know, Whitney Houston or Phil Collins or somebody who has so many hits, they're interested in. So that became my job when I went to Dick Clark.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So so that's kind of it's a circuitous route to get there, I guess you would say. But like you said, interviewing people there is an art to it, and I'm no expert even now, but I think that I've come a long way from since the since the early days for sure. Because yeah, I can remember being a bundle of nerves 15 years ago when I was first starting doing some of these podcasts. It was, but you get more relaxed. That's one thing. And like you said, it becomes more of a conversational style. And if it goes down a different road, then you just follow that road and then you circle back and eventually land the plane, as they say. So that's kind of how it works. I'm always fascinated when you're watching some of these quote unquote professionals, and they'll ask them if anything's happened, interesting, and they'll say something like, "Oh, I just ran over a kid out in the parking lot." Oh, okay. Well, what's has that's very nice. Well, what? And then they'll move on to something else, and it's like, whoa.
I have spent way too much time on YouTube watching interviews of people. What really makes me mad is when people get to interview artists who are rarely interviewed, and they botch it. There's so like I could make you automatically on top of my head. Okay, you got to ask this, this, and this, and they don't ask any of that stuff, and it drives me up the wall. And so I make so many nasty comments about you had 45 minutes with them, and you didn't ask Don Henley about firing Don Felder. Are you
Yeah,
kidding me? Or
that's a
what a
big
kiss
one.
ass! Oh, you just did a kiss ass interview, and you didn't give me much of substance. Like they drive me nuts. The ones
Yeah,
that kiss ass, the ones that kiss their ass, and gosh, but oh, you're so fantastic, and from day one, I think I come from the old school way. It's like just know your subject matter and do your job. And
yeah.
if you really know their music and their history, they will know, wow, this guy knows my music. He likes my music, not necessarily, and he and he's a fan, not necessarily. But that's how you get them to really engage in what you're saying. I'll tell you one example. In 1998, I think it was, Chicago came out with this compilation called The Heart of Chicago, 1967 to 19, I guess 98 at that point. So they had like a dozen old hits, and they recorded two new studio tracks. So I was interviewing James Pankow, who was the guy who wrote Just You and Me and so many great songs. He was the main horn arranger. And Walt Parazater, who was the flute player and also a horn player. And so at first they're just being just kind of very superficial, like, oh, how could we have known that, 30 years later we'll be talking to you and la la la, just real superficial, well, come on. So I said, it's really great that The Only One is the first time Robert Lamb has sung the lead on a Chicago single since Thunder and Lightning back in 1980. And they look at each other and they go like, hey, yeah. And you could tell they're thinking, holy shit, this guy knows. After that, it was a totally different interview because they know I know their music. And they talked about Peter Cetera and they talked about the frustration of him leaving the group and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like, that's kind of like another way of gaining favor with an artist, just know their history.
Yeah, it shows some interest. And even in interviews that I've done, and you and I were talking before we started here. I was interviewing Barry Scott a couple of years ago, who does the Lost 45s, and I think he realized we were on the same ground when he mentioned his first interview was Terry Jacks, and he said he was talking about how Terry Jacks, the flip side of his big hit "Seasons in the Sun." I said it before he could say it. I said, "Put the bone
Put the
in." And
bone
he said,
in.
"Yeah." he said, "Well, it's actually Terry told me it's actually not the clean song you think it is. It's definitely a double entendre that we all suspected it might be." And so those are the kind of things, like you said, when you realize you're on the same wavelength, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, for sure. Well, that's interesting. The process of how you got there. Now, you're very well researched. You take the time to know these subjects. What would the typical research be like when you were working for Dick Clark? I mean, when you knew that you had somebody coming up, that you were how long, how much time would you spend prepping, or just out of curiosity?
Well, this is, a large part of my time there. There was no internet. So all I had was, I would have People Magazine as a subscription, USA Today, Rolling Stone, and for the most part, I didn't have an intern. I had to go and cut my own damn articles out. So I had to put all these articles and file them, and in different folders and stuff. And so it was primarily newspaper clippings, magazine clippings that you would go by. But for every current album that they had, I would listen to it at least 4 or 5 times because not only did I have to interview them on the current single, I had to predict what songs were going to be released in the future as singles. So I wanted stories behind the songs. And especially from the mid 80s on, when they got into drum machines and they got really thick with the production, it's like it was really hard for me to hear where is the damn melody. It was really hard for me to say, do I like this or do I not like it? I did the same thing when I was reviewing albums for Pulse magazine or Bang magazine, Bam, and all those other magazines I was doing reviews for, because it took a while for me to really understand the song and the recording, and I wanted to give it a fair listen and not just give like my first impression after one listen. I don't think that's fair. So I would do a lot of that stuff and go to my whole file, go to all my Whitburn chart books, and make sure that I asked all the important about the important songs. You know.
Yeah, very very important because, like you said, the research it's that's where they can tell whether you're serious or not. And if you're very well researched and well prepared, you've done your homework. That's half of the battle. And absolutely, and to just and I think it's also just a common courtesy to these artists. You need to, if you've been granted some time to speak to these people, the least you can do is to show that you actually care.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very important. And I'm amazed at how many times, like you said, we see these interviews and it's obvious they're just doing this just to get publicity for themselves more. Well, I'll tell you another, really, you and I have discussed this online before. A good example, and this is kind of getting off, it's on topic, but it's kind of sort of, is the Paul Williams documentary. You and I equally hate it. The one I think Stephen Kessler, I think, is the director's name, and I can't say it enough how much I hate that film. And here was a good opportunity. This is exactly what we're talking about, a good opportunity to talk to a musical legend, to spend time with him. And the movie is about Stephen Kessler. It's not about Paul Williams at all. And, just every chance he gets, he's, humiliating, making little jibes at Paul Williams and the fact that he's, that the 70s have come and gone. And he was, it's so insulting to the legacy of this man who was, is a legend to you and myself and so many people. If you and I had had that opportunity, I mean, we would have just been beside ourselves. And it just, I saw that movie. I don't know when I've been that angry.
And as another guy, who's that guy? He did the Bee Gees documentary. How can you mend a broken heart?
Oh,
He did
Frank
the
Marshall. Yeah.
Frank Marshall. He's awful. That guy should not be allowed. I don't care how many. He's a movie producer. I don't care how many movies he did in the past. He should stay away from music documentary. He does not know how to do. He didn't even mention in the Bee Gees documentary the failure of the Sergeant Pepper movie that the Bee Gees and Peter Frampton did. How it just well, that's why Peter Frampton took so long to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because of that movie. Quite frankly, he didn't even mention that. I mean, oh,
Yeah, I know, and the lawsuit with Robert Stigwood, which kept them, from making new music there for a little while. My daughter's a huge Bee Gees fan, and she and I watched it together, and she said, "What about the lawsuit, Dad? He never mentioned." I said, "Yeah, that's a
so
pretty big
done.
one."
And he reunites the surviving members of the Beach Boys on the beach, and he purposely doesn't let us hear their conversation.
Yeah,
What kind of idiot does that?
yeah,
So
I have to admit that I would have done it. I would definitely have done it differently if it were up to me. Unfortunately, it wasn't. But
I
yeah,
think we got.
here's
I think you and I got to start a anti fan club of stop Frank Marshall from making any more music docs. We got to pick it outside the studio or Netflix or whatever it is and just create this movement.
I think he's got another one on the horizon. I think I
I'm
read
sure he
somewhere
does. Well,
there's
don't tell me the subject's probably going to piss me
yeah,
off.
I'm not sure, but anyway, yeah, so many missed opportunities there, and didn't really get into the deaths of the brothers. Just kind of talked about it in passing, almost like a put a screenshot up. Robin passed in 2000, whatever it was, or
As a footnote, and,
as
oh,
a
Andy Gibb
footnote.
passed.
Yeah,
Oh, Andy Gibb passed away. Oh, and then Robin Gibb passed away, and then no, Morris Gibb passed away, and then it's like all out of order too. Out of order.
yeah.
Wrong presentation. You know.
Yeah, it was definitely disappointing in on a lot of levels. Not as bad as the Paul Williams though.
Oh,
Let's go on the record and say that there are a
oh,
few things that are good in the Bee Gees. Nothing in the Paul Williams documentary is good. Anyway, we'll move along. So, well, I guess the next thing I was going to ask is, this is an obvious question, but the memorable interviews. I mean, there's good and there's bad. So I guess we can start with the good and work our way to the bad, or vice versa. I'll let you figure out how you want to do this. But there's always interesting stories, and everybody has the good experiences and the bad. So I'm curious about this for sure.
well, the good Donny Osmond, um, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, Frankie Valli and Bob Gaudio of the Four Seasons, David Gates of Bread, Richard Carpenter of the Carpenters twice, Lionel Richie, Olivia Newton-John, Tony Orlando, Bonnie Raitt was a sweetheart. Bonnie Raitt was, you know, I tried every year to get Bonnie Raitt to sit down for an interview since 1989 when she made a comeback with Nick of Time. And Capitol Records would just never let me interview. I think they thought she was too good for us, and so they would just let Rolling Stone interview her. And TV and radio was like the bastard child. Finally, in my last year there, I got her in 2005. So one of the nicest moments was I'm interviewing her, and I said, you've said in interviews that you've always mentioned your mother as much as your father, John Raitt, but because your father was in musical theater, in the articles they mention him and they just forget your mother. But your mother was the one who encouraged you to play piano, and you're playing piano on your comeback hit, Nick of Time. And she goes, wow, you're not even looking at your notes. I'm impressed. wow, yeah. So she goes into talk, and then we talk about other things. And then she goes at one point, she goes, "You're asking me questions nobody ever asked. This is great. I don't have to give the same old answers. I mean, this is great." I mean, so she was really, that kind of stuff. And that's part of just doing your research. So you don't ask the same old stupid questions. But she was a sweetheart. She was really nice.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Yeah. And
Well, Barry White. Oh, go ahead.
oh no, I was going to say tell the Barry White story because I've seen you've posted a little bit about this. This is a good one, so I'll let you do
Yeah.
this.
Well, Barry White's one of those situations where you don't know how it's going to go because he's not very friendly. So this is in 1990 because he hadn't had a top 40 hit since Oh What a Night in 1978. And he came back only because Quincy Jones had a new album called Back on the Block. And he had this song called The Secret Garden. And it had four guest vocalists: Barry White, El DeBarge, Al Sure, and James Ingram. So great, good excuse, interview Barry White. This is so cool because Barry White, he made these records that sounded like nobody else. Crystal clear backdrop with the piano, so crystal clear, and the strings. You felt like you're being enveloped in this whole different world. So I go to this place in Sherman Oaks, and so I always ask before I start the interview, how long do I have? Usually it's 45 minutes. And then I try to pace myself so I don't run out of time. He goes, "You just start and I'll let you know." That's how it starts. And he's chain smoking. He's like flicking his ashes at me. You just start and I'll let you know. So it's okay. So I go to my questions. And at one point I go, "Before you're famous, you wrote Doing the Banana Split for the Banana Splits for
Mm-hmm.
that Saturday morning cartoon show." You go, "That's right. That's right." Ah, ha, 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 ah, ha, ha, ha. So he's having a good time. Right? So, and later on, I tried to pitch the story to Bob Pruder at Goldmine Magazine. And he said, "I don't know. He's got a reputation as being a difficult interview." And he goes, "Well, I already did it." "Oh, you did?" "Yeah, well, how long did you go on for?" 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours? Wow, he really liked you, I guess. But what was so cool was after the interview was over, he took me outside. There were these sliding glass doors. There was like the grand piano in that room where we did the interview, and you walk outside the sliding glass doors, and then there's a waterfall in the back where I took a picture with him, which I shared on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, he showed me, we had a big rainstorm that year. We're talking about Walking in the Rain with the One I Love by Love Unlimited, which is one of my favorite records of all time.
Mine
One of a
too. Yeah.
one of a kind of record. And he says, "We line up all the mics along here to capture the rain for that record." And
Wow.
I felt like I had died and gone to heaven. Holy shit. Yeah. Anyway, so that's Party Perry. So I turned that into it. It's funny because I'm Japanese American. Sometimes you get weird reactions from people, right? So like James Ingram walked in to Dick Clark Productions to do my interview with him in 1990 when I Don't Have the Heart was big. He looks at me and goes, "Where are you from?" "Hawaii." "Oh, that's a beautiful place, man. Why'd you want to leave Hawaii?" "Oh, well,
Oh,
I wanted to go out to college, and they say if you want to get ahead, you kind of have to leave Hawaii." And I went to LA. And well, what a weird beginning. Like, what does it matter if I'm Hawaii? What if I wasn't from Hawaii? Very
right.
weird.
Yeah.
Like, where are you from? Like, it's like saying, "What are you?" What I got.
Yeah.
This is what I got out of it. What are you?
Yeah. Right. Right. It does. It is an odd start.
It is weird, but even that turned out good because he told me about how I don't know how he got into the story because I used to run track at Occidental College and in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and he told me that he had this weird system that a trainer taught him to do, which is you sleep for like 2 hours, you wake up, and you go to the track past midnight, and you go and do this routine, and you sprint and all that stuff, work out for I don't know how long, 45 minutes, an hour, and you come back and you sleep. And I went, "Wait a minute, how do you get good sleep?" And it doesn't make no sense. He goes, "No, no, no. See, most people, when they try to sleep, they're tossing and turning and they don't get full sleep. Me, when I hit the bed after come back from the track, I'm dead. I'm dead, man. I'm getting really good sleep. So we're laughing and laughing. The upshot of that story was after talking to him about that, it got me back into running because I hadn't run since 1981 when I was on the track team at Occidental College.
Hmm.
And I hadn't even run on my own just for the sake of it, like into 1984. So from 1990 on, August of 1990 on, every Saturday, if it is warm enough, I go and do my 5 sprints. I do the 300-meter dash, I do two 100-meter dashes, and I do two 200-meter dashes. And I'm timing myself out of the blocks like I'm doing a track meet. So that's part of the James Ingram.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So something positive comes out of that.
Yeah, it's funny, when you get when you take little things like that with you on your life's journey that you
Yeah.
pick up, and it is amazing with the people that you interact with. I've had a few of those experiences as well. I know, and yeah, there were a couple of things. You've posted this on social media too about Frankie Valli. This is kind of funny because with his I think he's still out there touring, if I'm not mistaken. But you
As
had
of, as of
posted,
last year, he was
yeah, I think he's
when
going
he
back
shouldn't
this year.
when he shouldn't have been.
Yeah, because you had asked him when you interviewed him, "Are you going to be doing? At what point are you going to be doing this?" And he said something along the lines of, "I'll know when to stop." And you were like, "I don't think you do."
He did not know when to stop, folks.
Yeah, it
Well, for
so
people who don't know, there were these several videos people were posting on social media, because he looks like, with all respect to him, because he's one of the best
yes,
vocalists of all time. And
absolutely,
I,
yeah.
I love, I don't think the Four Seasons put out a bad single from the late 60s on. I mean,
No,
just whether they smashes or flops, they just had great, great records.
yeah,
Um,
good production.
but but as of last year, he was going on tour and he's walking out like he's a zombie.
Yeah,
And he's opening his mouth and he seems to be singing, but everyone thinks he's lip syncing because he just looks like he's totally out of it. He can barely walk and he's just moving his mouth and I love you, baby. But it doesn't seem like he's really,
yeah.
to
It's
sing, you got to put your body into it too.
Yes, exactly. And conversely, Johnny Mathis is around the same age, and he realized when it was time to stop, and he quit in I think May of last year. He finally said, "I can't do this anymore," and he walked away gracefully. And his voice was still great because I saw some videos from him and from January of last year, 2025, and the voice was still there, but I think he was having trouble with remembering the lyrics, and he just knew that it was time. And I hope he's around for a good while with us because he's a legend as well, but he knew when it was time to go. And so you have to you have to give props to them. Now, another one that you posted that was quite interesting on social media was the guy who played the piano on Precious and Few. I
Oh
know
yeah.
the Climax, it was a one-hit wonder, but it's one of a song that holds a lot of meaning to me. I just it conjures up wonderful times in my life, memories of when the song was popular, and I was a toddler. Just I was very small at the time, just learning to walk, but somehow it just ties into those memories I have of the place I was living at the time. And anyway, so you could tell that story. I thought that was a good one.
Well, I interviewed Sonny Geraci, the lead singer of Climax, because Rolling Stone magazine would do every year whatever happened to, and they would have a series of different people who had hits in the 50s and 60s and hadn't been heard from for a long time. And so they interviewed Sonny Geraci. So I went to Matt Wilson and I said, well, can we do a follow up with this thing? Because I love Precious and Few. And he was also the lead singer of The Outsiders with Time Won't Let Me and all that. So I got approval. So I did a phone interview with him. He was in Cleveland. And then he said, we're talking about Larry Cox, the man who produced Precious and Few and all the Climax records. And he went on to produce all the Jefferson Starship hits in the 70s, like Miracles and Count on Me and Runaway and With Your Love. And so Sonny goes, I think he's still in Studio City. You should look him up. So I looked him up, and he was a very friendly guy. And he said, well, it sounds like you and I have to get together. Sure. So I went over with my clunky tape recorder, and we sat for hours. And Larry's another story. I don't know how much of this you need, but it's going to be in my book because I'm doing a book on guilty pleasure 70s artists.
Oh,
And
I love it.
everyone,
Keep
yeah,
going.
one is Tony Orlando and Don. These are all people I've already talked to. Tony Orlando and Don, Bee Gees and Barry White and disco. Tony Burrows, the lead singer of King of the Lead Singers, 5 hits, all 5 one-hit wonders. Bread, the Carpenters, Donny Osmond and the Osmonds, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, all that kind of stuff. But one chapter is devoted to Climax, and they only had one hit because I wanted to do a story about why is it that this man who had one of the most romantic voices in history, why did he only have one hit? And the answer is he sabotaged his own career by pissing off the head of the record company. And he wanted to be a rock and roll singer when everyone else around him said, your magic spot is when you sing ballads. He goes, no, man, I want to be like Three Dog Night, man. I want to be like the Guess Who. And he just fought it and fought it and fought it until no one played him anymore. But I interviewed so many people from that band, including Nick D'Amico, who's the guy who played da 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 da. He played the. He was an early
That's
member of.
it. Yeah.
He was an early member of the group when it was still called the Outsiders, because the Outsiders, Sonny left the Outsiders in Cleveland and he went to L.A. in '68, and he thought he could still make records as the Outsiders, so he put out 2 records until Tom King, the leader of the Outsiders, says, you can't use that name. I'm using that name. So they had to come up with another name, and they made it Climax. So Nick was part of the group when it was still the Outsiders, and he left like in 1970. But then when they were recording Precious and Few the next year, um, Larry Cox didn't like the way Johnny Stevenson, their keyboard player, was playing it. So someone suggested, well, why don't we bring back Nick D'Amico? So they bring back Nick, and he just goes, well, you want to play? Okay. So he came back just to play that. I go, okay, bye. And then a year later, it's a hit. But he's been long out of the group. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I can't imagine the feeling of sitting there hearing him play it for you. It's just,
Well, here's a funny thing. We got along so well that he invited me over to his house in Hollywood, and met his wife, his lovely wife Diane, and so we're eating, and at the end I said, "Can you play Precious in Few for me?" And his wife goes, "No," because it was like midnight or something at that point. We were talking so long. It was okay. I go, "Can I videotape this?" He goes, "No, no, no, no." But he starts playing Precious in Few. Like, this is the man. This is the man who played Precious in a Few. Because what people don't realize is that that song became a hit in Hawaii first, like at least 6 months before the rest of the country. It became a hit in January of '72 for the rest of the country, but in Hawaii, we're a sucker for good ballads. So that became a hit by the summer of '71. And all the follow-ups, Life and Brett was huge. Caroline, This Time was huge.
mm-hmm.
Walking the Georgia Rain, all of these songs did not go top 40. And most didn't even chart on the Hot 100. But that's why Climax means so much to me. You know?
uh, well, I know we've talked about some of the more memorable in a positive way, the folks that you've interviewed. But there's always the not so memorable, not memorable, but not in a good way. It's what I'm trying to say. And you've got a few of those as well. And I know one you've talked about is Barry Gibb. And we talked about the documentary, but you actually spent some time with the man himself, and that was not exactly what you'd maybe hoped for.
Yeah, it's a real shame because, the Bee Gees could not do any wrong in 1978, 79, 80. I mean, Barry Gibb was a freaking genius. I mean, if you look at all the songs he wrote, not just with the Bee Gees, but for other people, like he wrote Grease by himself for Frankie Valli. He wrote or co-wrote all the Andy Gibb songs that we know. They wrote Emotion for Samantha Sang. They wrote all those songs for Barbara Streisand's album Guilty. They wrote Heartbreaker for Dionne Warwick and Islands in the Stream for Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton and all this stuff. So to interview Barry, even if it was only on the phone, this is like a great moment for me. But what happened was that the Bee Gees had come up with their first album called ESP, which was their first album in like 5 years because of the disco backlash. They weren't having much success at radio. So this was their attempt to get back. And the lead single was called You Win Again, which had hit #1 in Europe, but it was having a problem in the United States. And so they were on the morning shows talking about this unfair backlash. So I thought, well, it's not a secret. Let's talk about this. We're talking about, and it ended up peaking at number 75. You win again. But but when I was talking to Barry, he just did a 180 on his mood. Like he didn't want to talk about anything negative, and he just wanted to say, "Oh, everything's going well. No, there's no backlash." Blah 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 blah. He just wanted to look at their career with rose-colored glasses or something. And so, at some point, he says, "I'm afraid you're asking a lot of negative questions." I am. I'm afraid so. Well, I'm sorry. Okay. Let me see what else. Okay, let's talk about your solo album. How do you think it did? Well, there you go again. You only asked the question because you know it didn't do well. Well, I mean, no, I mean, it could have been because they didn't promote it well, or it goes, so he's mad at me. Very rarely does anybody that I'm interviewing get mad, but he was mad at me.
Yeah.
And at the end, I said, well, I'm sorry. At the end of the interview, I said, look, I'm sorry. I think we had a misunderstanding. I said, oh, no, my man. It's okay, my man. The next day, Bud Scott at Music Connection magazine calls me up. What did you do? What? I got a call from Barry's manager wanting me to cancel this, quote, ambush article. What? He thinks you're buttering up, saying you're such a big fan, and then you ask all these negative questions to make them look bad. That son of a, I can't believe. He goes, don't worry. You have all the right intentions, blah, blah. But later, the joke is, unfortunately, the album did so poorly, it came and went, that Bud later was not interested in a Bee Gees article because it's like, we don't care anymore.
Yeah.
But it's going to be in my book, so I didn't do the interview for nothing.
Good. Very, very good. Well,
Barry.
they did have a top 10 single the next year though with one. So they came back and so it all worked out, I guess,
Yeah, yeah.
But so I guess but well, that was the 89 was an interesting year because we had this resurgence in people who had been laughed at and now they were getting back on the charts. Like Donny Osmond had a couple of top 10 hits, and then we had the Bee Gees, and then the very next year we had David Cassidy coming back with another top 40 record. So there was a whole slew of
Even
artists.
the Doobie Brothers came back.
Doobie Brothers, that's another
Doobie
one.
Brothers
Yeah.
came back. Yeah.
Yeah, and Joe Cocker also. He was another one that had kind of. I mean, he wasn't really thought of as a as a joke or anything, but he hadn't had a hit in a long time, and then he came back in 1990 with When the Night Comes. So there was quite a few of those that just came back after having been away for a long time.
But the funny thing was, I kind of had a hand in helping Donny Osmond make that comeback with
Well,
Soldier.
yeah, tell that story if you want to tell that one.
So June of '88, I leave American Top 40. I go to the LA Times, and the only idea for an article that Bob Hilburn, the esteemed pop music editor, really rock music editor, because he's very snobby about pop music. That's the only one that I pitch. He goes, yes, you have to talk about Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson taking off. Donny Osmond is a joke. Image problem. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, do it. So I called Bill Waite, who was Donnie's manager, and I give the whole spiel. Look, I want to do an article which gives credibility to Donny Osmond, la 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 la. And he says, well, we did an interview with Rolling Stone where the guy practically moved in with Donnie and his family for 2 weeks, and at the end, it was supposed to be for Rolling Stone. They put it out in Us magazine, and the title is "The Fall of the Osmonds." And I said, I know, I saw that, and it was horrible. And then we sat for an interview with 60 Minutes, and they caught Donnie in a day where he wasn't feeling great. They dimmed the lights, and he said, somebody said I should change my name. Because can you imagine how they made me feel? The two guys in Air Supply called up Bill and goes, is Donnie okay? He looks suicidal.
Mm.
So at that point, okay, that's it. No more interviews. We're going to let the music speak for itself. Only when we have music that will come out, then we'll do interviews. But no more interviews. These guys are they're making things worse. So here I am. I come along, right? So he goes, okay, I'll have him give you a call. A few days later, nothing. Call Bill Waite again. Look, listen, look, even if the music is great, If people's minds are not open, they won't play it. My article is going to make people open up their minds before they hear the music. Okay, I'll call you. Nothing. Third time, I'm mad. Get Donnie on the phone. Okay, I'll have him call you back. So Donnie calls me back. And he goes, I don't know. You guys did this awful review of me. I did a concert in, I think it was Santa Ana. And the only song from the past that I did was Go Away Little Girl. And I did it in a jazz kind of Al Jarreau kind of way. And your critic just made fun of it. And I go, I know what you're talking about, Donnie, but I'm not Mike Bohm. I didn't write that. I go, don't you remember I interviewed you at Norman Winter's office in 1986 with Matt Wilson from American Top 40? And he was trying to figure who I was. And eventually he figured, he goes, oh, now I remember. Okay, come on down to the studio. We're recording tomorrow. I'll tell you everything. So we go down. He tells me the whole story. And then I do a draft. I give it to Bob Hilbert. And Bob goes, Guy, look, I know you're a fan, but you really got to ask harder questions. I go, what? It's like he's insulting me like I'm being unprofessional. And he's the guy who's like president of the Bruce Springsteen fan club.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie critics used to make fun of him because they would say he did an article on Bruce Springsteen, and the angle was he didn't put out a new album this year. So they're all laughing at him, right? So he's calling me unprofessional. So he goes, no, Guy, I'm serious. Ask Donnie what was the worst moment in his career. I'm serious, Guy. Ask him. I go, fine. So I go talk to Donnie. So I talk to Bob. He wants me to ask you, what was the worst moment of your life? He goes, okay, I see where this is going. I was afraid of this. Is Bob there? Yeah. Can you patch me through? Yeah. Okay. They go at for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Bob, this is why I didn't want to talk to Guy. I'm tired of being compared to Michael Jackson. La, 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 la. He goes, Donnie, look, you want a positive article? Take out an ad, pal. Take out an ad. He was being mean to Donnie. And Donnie goes, well, I got a lot of great things going on. Oh, yeah, well, name one thing. He couldn't name anything. He was frozen. And so I heard both sides. Bob goes, Guy, he couldn't name one good thing. Donnie goes, I froze. I should have said, well, look, Soldier of Love is in the top 30 in the UK. I got signed to Virgin Records. Peter Gabriel loaned me his studio for free. He believes in me. But I just got caught in. I couldn't think of what to come back. I was shocked at the way Bob was coming at me. Anyway, Bob says, look, I don't usually do this, but just so you know, this is not an ambush article. I'm going to give you a draft of Guy's article. Now, we reserve the right to make final edits, but just so you know how it's coming along, okay? Goes, okay, all right. Donnie calls me back. He goes, okay, I know this is not the final edit, but you got a lot of great things in there. Wow, just Donnie, trust me. Okay, all right. So the article finally comes out the day after the American Music Awards. And he calls me up at home. He doesn't even say who he is. He goes, ho, it was better than I thought it could have been. You had it so important. You got all the pictures of me throughout my career. And la, 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 la. And one of the main quotes I had in there, I talked to a guy at Epic Records who signed him in 86. And his great quote was, it scared the crap out of me. It was actually Chet. It scared the crap out of me. The thought of his name connected to mine. But then Frank Rand, after working with Donnie, came to a different feeling. He goes, I couldn't believe someone with so much talent in his body could be denied the chance to make records. Boom, there you go. And at the end, I have Donnie saying, if people want to hear my album, I'll let them hear it. But I'm not going around knocking on doors anymore. You know why? Because I begin to understand I'm just as good as anybody else. Boom, mic drop. So Donnie was overwhelmed. And at the end, he goes, friends for life, man. Friends for life. I went, whoa, okay. When you get a gold record, you just make sure I get a copy. So we're just laughing at this. So the funny thing is, by the time that article came out, it took so long to do it. I was already at Dick Clark writing radio shows. So I was trying to get a hold of him because I was going to do a cover story on him for Music Connection magazine. And he was too busy to sit down, but he would call me from on the road, leave me messages. He goes, hey, Guy, we just went from 23 to 15 on Billboard. And it all started with your article. And another call. Guy, I'm doing all these interviews, and they all had your article because it was syndicated. So my article did the job that it set out to do, which is open up your mind. He hasn't released a record in 10 years. Any prejudice you have toward him is yours and not your audience, not your top 40 audience who does not know who Donny Osmond is. So we find, so because he made my Dick Clark chart, I had to go and interview Donny Osmond. So we go to Capitol Records, and he's having a meeting with video producers for who's going to direct Sacred Emotion, his follow-up single. And he's very serious.
Yeah.
And then Bill Waite goes, hey Donnie, I like to introduce you to someone. His name is Guy Aoki. He stands up in his chair. He goes, he's like just like pointing in my stomach. He goes, oh, you give a guy a top 10 record, it goes to his head, huh? He goes, He goes, and Bill goes, top five. Top five. It went to number five. It went to number five, 8 to 5. And so anyway, long story short, we go down to do our interview, and I've never seen this before. So Donnie's sitting down and he looks at me with this look of reverence, like, oh my God, this is the guy who started this thing for me. And now I'm number five on the chart. And so we did this interview. He couldn't believe how well he was doing. And he got a record contract with Capitol Records. And after my article, he had different labels calling him, offering contracts. And so we had a lighthearted moment. I said, well, does this open the door for the Osmonds to make a comeback? And he goes, yeah, I don't see why not, because the name Osmond, thank goodness, is cool again. So I go, oh, so you think? And he goes, thank goodness. Pounds the table. He turns dead serious. And he goes, you were the one. Our very first conversations, you told me, don't be ashamed about it. There was nothing wrong with those records. But I was, because of the image. But now I saw my name in Billboard magazine, and it said, Osmond leads comeback trail, and people like Donna Summer and the Doobie Brothers are following in my footsteps. And for once, it was nothing tongue-in-cheek. It was not making fun. You have no idea how that feels.
Oh.
And all I could do was smile. I go, well, I smile. He goes, well, maybe you do. And he's finally smiled again. But that's the kind of epiphany he went through. I was ashamed. You're absolutely right. I was ashamed, and I shouldn't have been ashamed. But so you said, and he said, it's funny. Now that I got a current hit, I can look back and I can appreciate those records. Donnie, I said, you made these records in 1 or 2 takes. The rest of us are still analyzing the harmonies. I tell anybody, listen to the ending of Puppy Love. Listen to the ending of Too Young, the old Johnny Mathis song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Armies of the Brothers, they weave in. It's wondrous. I say if Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys had grown up in the 70s as opposed to the 50s, he would have analyzed not the harmonies of the Four Freshmen. He would have analyzed the harmonies of the Osmonds. Anyway.
Yeah.
Some of my Donny Osmond stories, not all, but some of them. But super good guy. And
sure sounds like it. Yeah.
Now he's in Vegas ongoing. He's like a regular guy. He did a Donnie Marie thing for like 1 year, 6 months. It became, I don't know how many years. They love him. It's safe to like those songs. And most of the songs he sings, Puppy Love, Go Away Little Girl, One Bad Apple. He doesn't have to be ashamed anymore. It's part of his legacy.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad it came full circle, because people are it's Barry Scott was talking to me about how in Europe the Osmonds were considered to be hard rockers, like Led Zeppelin, in that same category. That's the way they felt about them over there, and in America they were labeled as bubblegum. So it's all in perception, and it's just amazing
because One Bad Apple was our first introduction to the Osmonds, outside of seeing them on the Andy Williams show. They were regular guests, but they had no hits. One Bad Apple, number 1, 1971. So that it is. It flopped in the UK. So their first introduction to the Osmonds is Crazy Horse. Heavy rock band. They thought they were a heavy rock band.
Mm-hmm. So, that's
but
right.
They could make those heavy rock songs if they wanted to. I mean, it's just so unfair. Anyway.
It is. Well, we'll move along to since we only had one bad apple, so to speak, Barry Gibb, a bad pun there. I'll let if you have one more bad interaction that we you could share since we've shared a couple of positive ones. Just one more bad one that comes to mind. If not, we'll move along to something else. But I was just curious.
Well, Amy Grant, a couple of things happened. Like one, I interviewed like three times, twice in person and one on the phone, because she was always making my chart. And like she had sued Marvel Comics because they have this comic book, Doctor Strange. This, oh, he had his own motion picture. He's a mystic, magical guy, and they used her image on the cover, and they sued. She sued Marvel Comics because she didn't want to be associated with the occult. So I thought, well, that's a fair question, right? Lawsuits are pretty public. So
Mm-hmm.
I asked him about that, and she obviously felt very uncomfortable about it. She kind of like thought she wanted to be like a well-kept secret or something. And then
Yeah.
she goes, and I don't know what she answered. She didn't quite answer. She just kind of like tried to distance herself from the question and the lawsuit. And then she goes, "You're asking a lot of strange questions." Not really. So that's one. And later, Dick Clark told me that she and Vince Gill were fooling around, and they're both married to other people.
Yeah.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
the official story later on was that they broke up their marriages and then they came together.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't let on that I knew the real story when I interviewed Amy over the phone. She was in Nashville. She was recording it on her end. So I was just asking about Vince Gill and something. Maybe she has ESP. She picked up that I knew or something because after the whole interview was over, I mean, there was no crossword between us at all. Interview went
Yeah.
fine, and she was supposed to mail the recording over to me so I could use it for the countdown, and she would not give the tape. So I did
Wow.
the whole interview. I listened to her album again 5 times so I could know the album. Ask, current single, follow-up singles. The funny thing is, it was such a flop that none of the songs from her album made my chart, adult contemporary chart.
Mm-hmm.
And so I couldn't use it anyway. But I could have used some of the questions I asked about past hits because I always do that. I always try to get a different angle on past hits so I can put it on the spotlight. But I didn't. I resented wasting my time talking to someone like that. So I mean, she's a hypocrite. You know, Miss
Yeah.
Christian, and she's sleeping around and all that kind of stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, it's that is interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, yeah, but if you do enough of these, it's gonna happen. I mean, you're gonna have some bad interactions like that. I guess it's just par for the course, as they say.
Mm.
Well, are there any regrets in terms of people that you wanted to interview and you came real close to interviewing, but it just didn't happen for whatever
Oh,
reason?
yeah, several people. Okay, so one was Andy Gibb because Matt Wilson, who was the associate producer at American Top 40, he and I were big fans of Andy's, and we wanted to do an interview with him. And I just thought if I could just tell him, Andy, I mean, he was having all these drug problems already in the 80s. And I wanted to pump up his ego by emphasizing some of the stuff he did because he felt the whole thing was his whole career was handed to him by Barry and his brothers because Barry wrote, I just want to be your everything. Andy Gibb comes up with the title, Love is Thicker Than Water. Barry writes the entire song by himself. Shadow Dancing, the Bee Gees write that and they give it to him. So he felt he didn't deserve this. He felt that's probably part of his insecurity why he took drugs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we made it known that we want to interview him. And his people called us on the day that we were mixing the show. Must have been Thursday. So we could not do it, obviously. And then Matt kept calling back and they never rescheduled. It was never scheduled. We never got to interview him, and then he died in 1988. So that was a shame.
Yeah.
I want to interview Rupert Holmes because he was one of my favorite singer-songwriters. People know him from Escape, the Pina Colada song, and him, but he wrote my favorite song of all time, which was Echo Valley 26809 by the Partridge Family.
Oh
Just
yeah.
if you haven't listened to it, listen to the lyrics. It's about innocence lost that can never be regained. And the lyrics keep changing in the chorus slightly. Rupert Holmes co-wrote that song. And I wanted to interview, and I was getting strung along by this guy in New York named Stan Harris. Real New Yorker, real extroverted, attention deficit disorder, all that stuff. And I thought we are getting close. And then he said, we can't do an interview now. Something catastrophic has happened. Rupert Holmes's daughter just died. His 10-year-old daughter died.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that. So we never did that.
Yeah. And the song that he wrote for the Jets, I think was it You Got It All? I think
Yeah.
he wrote that for his daughter before she passed, I believe.
Is that what it was?
I think it was, yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
or maybe it was after. I can't remember the timeline exactly, but it was written for his daughter. I do
Well,
remember.
it could have been inspired after she died.
Yeah, yeah, I can't remember the
Something like that.
timeline exactly. Yeah, he's been a frequent guest on well, he was a frequent guest on the Gilbert Gottfried podcast, and he was on there 2 or 3 times, and he was actually at the memorial service they had for Gilbert Gottfried after his passing, so they evidently had become really close.
Wow.
And then Gilbert's his co-host has started his own podcast, and Rupert has been a guest on that as well. So he's still out there doing interviews, and I just love the guy. He's such a great raconteur. He has great stories about showbiz and the people he's run into. So he's a great one.
Another song he wrote, it was on his last pop album. The album was called Full Circle. And the first song is called The End, ironically. And it's about feeling like you're never gonna love again. It's over for you, and all of a sudden, there she is. It's such a song of hope.
Oh
There's
yeah,
so many great songs. He wrote such. I had a friend in college who put the lyrics to "The People That You Never Get to Love" on his bulletin board, and it was on that the Partners in Crime album, which with the
oh I
Pina Colada song and him.
love that song. Yes.
And basically, for those who don't know, it's about all the people, the strangers that you meet in the elevator
Hmm.
or here or there. And if you just have the guts to talk to them, you never know what might happen. But you're too shy, you look down at your feet, all that kind of stuff. So my friend used that as a motivator to talk to girls because he was shy too.
Yeah.
Such a great song. Oh,
Oh, that's fantastic. That's such a great idea.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
there's one off of his first album. I think it's Widescreen is the name of the album, and it's called Terminal. And
yes. Oh,
that's the one that gets me. Yeah.
oh, oh,
Yeah.
that is so sad.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. That's an
Term-
incredible
terminal
song.
is used in two different ways, as in
Yes, yes.
catching the train and I got an incurable disease.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
and the
Listen to
orchestra.
Terminal by Rupert Holmes, please.
Yes, absolutely. I played it for a friend of mine who knew who Rupert Holmes was, but he had never heard that, and he was kind of wowed by it. And I said, "Yeah, this is," and the orchestration and the arrangement of the recording, because I think he said in the interviews that I've heard him in, he said that he knew that he might not get another shot, so he wanted to just do whatever he could to make this first album stand out. And if nobody ever bought it or they listened to it, at least he could be proud of it. So the orchestrations in that first album are just amazing. And of course, Barbara Streisand famously heard the album and then hired him to co-write some of the songs for A Star Is Born. So somebody was listening.
All the
So,
critics were listening, but no one was buying it. Yeah.
unfortunately, yeah,
All
great,
the
great
critics
album.
loved it. The critics loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But and of course we would be remiss if we didn't mention Timothy, his ode to cannibalism. So
Timothy by the Buoys went to number 17 in 1971.
that's right. That's
He
right.
wrote that
Yes, he
about
did.
cannibalism.
He did. And amazing. That's a whole other story. Well, yeah. So those are a couple of the regrets you had. Well, we've all got them, and so yeah, that does happen. Unfortunately, timing or whatever. But yeah. Well, we've been talking here almost an hour.
Hmm.
And so I think we've gotten some really good stories. I really appreciate you coming on to talk about these interviews that you've conducted, rubbing shoulders with some of these people who have meant so much to so many of us who are music fans. And we will definitely be looking forward to your forthcoming book because I'm sure it will be just chock full of stories.
Someone's gonna have to put a gun to my head to give me a deadline, or it's never gonna be finished. But yeah.
Oh, you've
So,
got to do it. You've got to do it. I'm telling you, we're out here rooting for you. We want to read it. So
mhm.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. And maybe we'll do a part three at some point in the future. But for now, we're going to wrap this up. So thanks again for coming back on the podcast to talk about meeting and interviewing your musical heroes.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's been fun as always.